Hello everyone and welcome to the second video in my Thanksgiving 2022 series. In the last video, I used this greeting from the Gina Designs Doodled Autumn stamp set, and I have been really excited to work with the leaf stamps in this set. I have a card today that showcases this largest leaf stamp against a fall colored spray stained background, and I'm showing all of these gorgeous colors off on some very dark black cardstock. I'm going to start off with some watercolor paper. This is 140-pound cold press paper. Watercolor paper usually has a smooth side and a more textured side. I'm embossing and inking on the textured side, and I'm going to stamp this largest maple leaf from the Doodled Autumn set in my Misty. I'm using a stamp positioner in case I decide to ink the stamp twice for embossing. I'm using Versamark ink, and this is a brand new stamp pad, so I should get a really good impression for embossing. I'm using a super fine detail black embossing powder, and I'm just making sure that all of the embossing ink is evenly covered. Detail and super fine embossing powder are great for really intricate images. Once I'm satisfied with the coverage of the embossing powder, I'm ready to clean up any stray powder and then heat set the powder with my heat tool. I'm really happy with the embossing, so I'm ready to move on to inking up the background of this image. I am using spray stains today, so I'll use my spray box. I have a clean paper towel in the bottom to absorb any overspray, and I want really heavy coverage of ink so I get that intense ink color, but I don't want any puddling of ink on the surface of the paper. I'll start with the spray stain in Lumberjack Plaid. This is the newest color in the Distress line of inks, and it is really gorgeous. I'm going to spray only in the top left corner down to the bottom left edge. Next, I'm using the spray stain in Forest Moss. I'm not using a lot of this color, mostly in the upper right-hand corner, as I'm concerned that it might blend with the red and it might create a brown tone that I want to avoid. And I will leave the rest of this for the next color, which is a Distress Mica stain in Harvest Moon. This is a mica stain, so it has a glimmer effect. And as I apply this, I'm going to slightly overlap the Lumberjack Plaid at the bottom so that it creates another color, more of an orange blend. This will need to sit until it is completely dry, and then I will be ready to die cut. I'm going to use a clean paper towel to very gently go over the embossed area to remove any ink that's sitting on top of the embossing. I'm wiping very, very gently, and you can see that some of the ink does transfer to the paper towel and the embossing just looks a little more vivid. Okay, I'm ready to die cut this image. I am using the Trinity Stamps Embossed Edge Circle Stack, and I'm using the second largest circle die. And this measures approximately 3 3/4 inches in diameter. I'm going to line up the die so that the image is centered. Then I can tape this down and it is ready for die cutting. I have the Lawn Fawn just stitching double circles, and I have a note on the pouch to remind myself that these dies only emboss, they don't cut. So I'm going to use my die cut leaf image to find the next largest circle die that also fits one of the stitched circle embossing dies. I'll tape this larger circle die to my cardstock, which is Hero Art's Hero Hues 111-pound cardstock in pitch black, my favorite. This is a 5 1/4 inch diameter circle, so it's going to fit exactly within this piece of cardstock. I have my circle die cut, and now I can line up the stitched embossing die inside the circle, and I can run this back through my die cut machine to create that embossed stitching. I'm checking the fit for the circles and the embossing, and everything looks great, so I am moving on to the greeting for the front panel. I'm using the Happy and Thanksgiving stamps from the Doodled Autumn stamp set. I am going to line these up in my MISTI, and I need to be very careful to position the Happy stamp no higher than the ascender in the word Thanksgiving. The reason for this is that I don't have a die that perfectly fits this stamp, so I'm going to use a really handy trick to stretch a die that I do have. I'm going to use my anti-static powder tool on this black cardstock, and then I'll ink this up with the VersaMark embossing ink. For this greeting, I am using Wow metallic embossing powder in copper. I really like how the metallic embossing mirrors the shimmer of the mica stain in the leaf image. I am making sure I fully cover all of the embossing ink with the powder. Then I will heat set this with my heat tool. I will use my sand eraser to rub out any stray flecks of powder, and then I am ready to die cut the greeting strip. So here's the well-known hack for stretching a greeting or sentiment die. In this instance, the die I have is wide enough for my greeting, but it isn't tall enough. So I'm going to die cut this greeting in 2 passes on my die cut machine. The first pass will only cut the top of the greeting and down the sides of the die. And I do this by positioning the part that I want to cut on the cutting plate, and the part that I don't want to cut is going to be positioned off the bottom of the plate. I'll then flip the greeting, reposition the die so that the bottom of the die is on the cutting plate and the top of the die is off the plate and won't cut. When I make my second pass through the die cut machine, I have a perfectly cut, taller greeting. Okay, here's my greeting strip, and I am ready to start assembling the front of this card. I'm using that same Hero Hues 111-pound cardstock in pitch black. This will be a portrait-oriented card. I've cut the cardstock to 5.5 by 8.5, and I've scored it at 4 1/4. I'm going to start by adhering this embossed leaf image to the larger stitched black circle underneath. I'm just using Tombow adhesive, taking care not to get too close to the edge with the glue so I don't get squeeze out, and I'm being very careful that I glue this down exactly in the center of the larger circle. And here's a tip that will help you to always have a perfect fold. After scoring, fold the paper over but match the edges of the card before you use your bone folder to press the fold. My scoring board is very forgiving in the 1/32 to 1/16 inch range, so there's a little bit of give in that score line that allows you to have a perfectly folded card. I'm going to pop up my maple leaf image a bit with some foam tape. I am using a 1/4 inch tape, and I'm cutting small snips in the tape every 1/4 to 1/2 inch so I can ease this tape around the circle without having to cut a lot of very small pieces of foam tape. I will also add strips of foam tape along the center of the circle to give it some more stability. This front embossed panel is ready to be adhered to the front of the card, and I'm just using the lines in my craft mat to line up the center of this leaf so I can make sure I get this exactly in the center of this front panel. Next, I'm adding foam tape to the back of my greeting strip, and I'm adhering the greeting to the bottom of the card. The last step for the front of this card is to add some embossed dots around the leaf image. I'm using the larger ball tip of a stylus. This is from my scoring board, and I'm just pressing into the embossing ink and then pressing straight down onto the front of the card. I'll do this on both sides of the image at the top of the panel, and then I will apply the embossing powder and heat set before I move on to the bottom part of the panel. I am using an anti-static powder tool down here because the area is a little bit smaller, and I probably couldn't get in there with a sanding eraser if I have any embossing powder that is in areas I don't want it to be. I'm following the same process that I did at the top of the panel with the dots. I am just inking up this stylus with the embossing ink, and then I'll go over everything with the embossing powder and then heat set. Lastly, I'm going to create an insert for the inside of the card. Anytime I use a dark cardstock for the base, I like to create an insert so I have a place to write a note to the recipient of the card. I'm using the smaller, what looks like a beech tree leaf from the Doodled Autumn stamp set, and I'll ink this up in my Misty. I am using VersaFine Clair Pigment ink in Nocturne. This has become one of my favorite black inks, and I use it in many of my cards. It's a beautiful dark black ink and it stamps perfectly. I'm going to give this panel a second to dry because it is pigment ink, and then I can die cut and emboss the panel as I did on the black circle on the front of the card. For the panel, I'm using the Waffle Flower A2 layers dies and also the Lawn Fawn Just Stitching double rectangles dies. Again, the Just Stitching dies don't cut, they just create an embossed, stitched impression on the panel. I'm lining up the layer die using the die that gives me the desired size for the inner panel, and I've chosen a stitched die that is just slightly smaller than the layer die, so that the stitching is very close to the cut edge of the panel. I'll tape both of these dies into place and run this through my die cut machine. Okay, the inside panel is complete. I'm checking to make sure I like the dimensions of the panel before I adhere it to the card base. I think this looks great. I really like this clean, simple look for an inside panel. I'm going to use Tombow adhesive to place this panel inside my card, and I'm checking to make sure I have the correct orientation before I glue this down. And everything looks great. I'm going to glue this into place and this card will be complete. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I'll have one more Thanksgiving card in this series, and then I am moving on to a few Christmas projects that I'm really excited to share. I'll have the full list of materials for this card up on my blog in a few days. I hope you will visit my blog as well at prettypaperblackbirds.com. Thank you so much for watching.